Good morning, YouTube and everyone. Let me make sure that this camera thing is on actually before we get started here. Press record. And let's see. How's that? Better, YouTube? You guys can see me now. So good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's having a great day today, and we can tell that the markets are having a great day considering this rally. A gap higher on the US reopen, the overnight session. So let's take a look at what happened. We got some news overnight, we got some news this morning, and we've got plenty of across the world here after we got some early data of the coronavirus vaccine trials. So this raised some hopes that we would return back to what we consider the normal, the original, and we saw equities flush up. So US futures, Dow Jones ahead by 1.3%, probably a bit higher by now. S&P and NASDAQ up 1.1 and 0.8 respectively. NASDAQ slightly lagging on this rally. We haven't seen NASDAQ hit a new all-time high yet, which is surprising considering we've been hitting all-time highs pretty much every day on the NASDAQ. And if any time was the time, I would think it'd be now. But we haven't yet hit a new all-time high on NASDAQ. European shares have also jumped, led by travel and leisure companies, while shares in China fell after a US sanction over Hong Kong. So it seems that every time we get some positive news on the vaccine for the COVID stuff, the markets do manage to rally as expected. But this is in a way looking a little tough because it does seem that the economy is hinged on a vaccine. It doesn't seem like this thing's going away anytime soon. And without a vaccine, if some of these trials start busting down, we'll see a pretty significant drop in the rally. So we have to continue this momentum to continue this sustained upside in market rallies. So again, continuing with this vaccine news, after seeing a lot of cases drastically rise in a lot of parts in the US, we've seen some US places shut down again, not to mention a global rise in cases. We got some positive news from Moderna, up about 17% after the closing bell yesterday. And this was after the company released that there was some data that its potential COVID vaccine produced a quote-unquote robust immune response in all 45 patients in its early human trial. Now, the Oxford COVID-19 vaccine that is backed by AstraZeneca, whose shares are up now 4% pre-market, is generating a kind of antibody and T cell or killer cell response that researchers would hope to see. So this is the first data, and it's due to be published very soon, says Robert Peston in The Lancet. Now, in related to other vaccine players, we've also seen moves in biotech this morning on Pfizer as well, up about 1.3%, and BNTX is up nearly 5%. In other news, if we jump back to the FANG and a lot of these tech companies right here on the NASDAQ, we can see that Apple is holding its strength and NASDAQ is holding its strength. A lot of tech is holding its strength. And we could even see NASDAQ at the $400 mark per share today, as we've seen NASDAQ kind of avoid some of these tax-paying regulations. Now, for NASDAQ to actually start the $2 trillion market cap club, it would have to hit about $460+ per share, just shy of the $465 level. Now, I do realize that is about $80 away, not $70 away, depending on what the price is right now. But if we start breaking into that $400 level, Apple could keep ripping. So Apple actually does not have to pay the 13 billion euro in Irish back tax, according to the EU General Court, which concluded that the tech giant has not been granted a selective economic advantage and, by extension, state aid. So this decision, which can only be appealed on points of law to the EU's highest tribunal, is a setback for the European Commission, which ruled in August 2016 that Apple's practice of channeling sales through units in low tax member states violated a bloc's state aid So these rules apparently were violated back in 2016 and they agreed upon something, but now it does seem that NASDAQ will not, I mean, not NASDAQ, sorry, Apple will not have to be paying some of these taxes, which is a huge advantage, which could help it pop up to that $400 level, especially on NASDAQ's strength into today. So a lot of this good news for Apple, all these tech giants, FANG, is starting to accumulate a lot. We've seen Amazon rip into new all-time highs day after day, and Apple could start joining them in the chase for that $2 trillion mark. So, in other news, we've seen bank earnings start coming out. So, as lenders kick off the earnings season this quarter, we're very excited to see what the other earnings have in store across the sectors, how it will affect, and mainly the US GDP for the second quarter. This is going to be a very interesting quarter. End of July, I think, a lot of market volatility. We haven't really seen summer markets yet, and this is going to help us continue with this good movement. Now, we've seen lenders kick off their quarterly reports, and there appears to be two sides of banking that are faring fairly different in this COVID pandemic. JP Morgan recorded a $33.8 billion revenue with a 54% jump in investment banking fees from a year ago, while Wells Fargo lost about $2.5 billion in Q2, and Citigroup disappointed after highlighting swelling credit losses reserves. So on the earnings front today, more banks are set to report results. Goldman Sachs, they may have already reported. U.S. Bancorp, BNY Mellon, and PNC Financial Services. So we're going to continue to see lending come out in these earnings. And this is one of the sectors that we're going to be watching for very intently because we are expecting to see a hit in the lending sector in terms of revenue because of all these low interest rates, just Fed back money, this continued stimulus. But from what we're seeing right now, there's a mixed bag of nuts. So we're going to see how financials continue. We've seen earnings get slashed in a few of these financial companies, and also dividends get slashed. So we're going to have to keep an eye out on that. Now, as we go from sector to sector, it's going to be very interesting to see how a lot of these earnings, how the pandemic actually affected a lot of these companies in Q2, where we could see upside or downside depending on how they may have done. Obviously, companies with a lot of cash reserves, like these big guys, Apple, Amazon, name it what you will, they're probably going to do a decent bit better, especially Amazon might pop on earnings. There are selective companies that we're expecting to see rip on earnings, but at the same time, there could be a lot of damage. Remember, there's 500 companies in the S&P. If 5 of them do outstandingly well, that account for 20%, it could prop up the index and that market slightly. But again, if the 495 that are not included in this all tank and do miserably, then realistically, that 80% is going to outweigh that 20% that do well. So we'll see what happens here. But we've got some more news, Hong Kong news. President Donald Trump's landmark decision yesterday to strip Hong Kong of certain special privileges adds further uncertainty for business and banks in the financial hub. So the city has recently found itself the focus of rising tensions between the two largest economies this world's seen, China and the US, imposing tighter controls on its laws. Now, the US actually seeks to push back against Beijing's rising influence, while banks will get some time to adjust to new rules, and some of Wall Street's biggest lenders risk facing a cascade of sanctions or loss of access to the Chinese market due to this. And as we go around the world in OPEC news, OPEC and its allies are expected to announce plans to start tapering production cuts from August after today's meeting. So we got an OPEC meeting coming up today. We may see a continued production cut in this market after we saw a scare of a boost in production. So if we start seeing production cuts, we could see oil back above that 41.5, $42 level. And with that, we could maybe get that oil rally, that seasonal rally into the end of the summer. Now, in more news, we've got industrial production data at 9:15 a.m. this morning in about 3 minutes time. The Bank of Canada's latest rate decision is at 10, so watch that CAD dollar if you guys are trading it. Philadelphia Fed President Patrick Harker and New York Fed President and New York Fed Executive Vice President Lori Hogan speak later today, while the Beige Book is published at 2 p.m. So today is tax deadline day, as well as Goldman, United Health Group, Bank of New York, Alcoa, and many others are starting to report this earnings season. So we'll start to see how earnings come out in a lot of these sectors, and we'll take it from there. In market news, though, we've rallied pretty aggressively. We breached a new high that we haven't seen in months now, the 32.33 even on the S&P 500 futures, a pretty significant pop off that news. We got about a 30-point gap higher from what it seems 25-point gap higher from yesterday's close to the Globex reopen. And from there, we have held a lot of ground. So if we continue to see prices above these 3200s, we may make a push to that all-time high in the S&P 500 futures. So we'll watch that and NASDAQ as a lot of company earnings come out this quarter, and we'll go from there. So we're just going to jump in our live room and do some analysis on levels with the team. If you guys wanted to join us, jump on over to TradeProAcademy.com, and we can get this going. So today we've got oil news as well, where we can make a decent chunk of our profits, our monthly profits in just a single day, a few trades a day. Now let's take a look at that, and we'll see YouTube and everyone tomorrow morning. Take care, everyone.